So live stream is on. Wonderful. Board. And we are live. Welcome, everyone. Today, I am joined by David, co-founder of Babylon and professor at Stanford. But before we get into that, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Albert, CEO of Bitcoin Startup Lab, and welcome to the Who's Who and the Founder's Journey into Bitcoin interview series. The Bitcoin community has come together to celebrate innovative and significant achievements on Bitcoin so that we reinforce and grow the innovation culture on Bitcoin. Significant achievements on Bitcoin are things that were done for the very first time ever or setting a new record to push forward the innovation frontier on Bitcoin. This show is brought to you by the Bitcoin Startup Lab. We're a top pre-accelerator in the Bitcoin ecosystem, helping people turn their ideas into investment-worthy startups. And a big shout out to our media partner, CryptoSlate, a crypto-agnostic media platform that brings the latest happenings on Bitcoin to the rest of the crypto world. And of course, a big thank you to all our teams and all the guest speakers that have come together to make this show possible and accelerate the advent of the Bitcoin economy. So let's invite David, co-founder of Babylon and professor at Stanford, up. Hi, David. Thanks for joining us today. How are you doing? Good. Hey, Albert. Thanks for inviting me here. Yeah, this is an honor for us to be able to interview, and this is going to be a very inspirational to many aspiring founders and entrepreneurs and innovators that are, thinking about coming to the Bitcoin space, because we're going to build this Bitcoin economy together. So as our listeners know, this show is about talking about the founder origin story, and then we end on the big achievement that you did, for the first time ever. We have a protocol that can stake Bitcoin, right, to secure POS chains and earn a yield from POS chains. So this is quite the innovation. And you guys had the title of doing this for the first time ever. So, but before we get into that main event, let's start from the top. Can you share with us, even before you did Babylon Chain, even before you became a Stanford professor, like, maybe even before university, what were the signs that you knew that you would innovate or you're an entrepreneur? Right, you could be hacking something together as an invention, or it could be something that maybe like a side hustle, like something entrepreneur. Can you recall the first time you did something like this and share with the audience? Yeah, sure, Albert. So, my background. I think the beginning of my background was in research and innovation was started when I was a grad student at MIT. So that was where I had a start to exposure to research. So I must say I was a very, I would say, academic person in the beginning, where I was really interested in focusing on doing math, science type research. Okay, that was sort of the beginning roots. But then, after working on this stuff for a while, math and science, then I realized that, hey, it'll be really great. Ideas are ideas, research ideas are great, but if they don't impact the real world, then it doesn't seem to be very satisfying, just idea for idea's sake. And so that's where I started thinking about sort of doing research, but with a purpose, with a focus on trying to make a difference to the world. And I think my starting point there was in the mid-90s. So during the mid-90s, there was something interesting happening in the technology space. At that time, cell phones was a novelty. Very, very few people have cell phones. It's very hard to imagine nowadays when everybody has multiple cell phones. It's hard to imagine back in the day where cell phone was really a very novelty. And that was not really that long time ago, 20, 30 years ago, when nobody had a cell phone. This concept was very new. And so at that time, there was this dream that at some point, everybody can get connected to information at any point, at any time. You don't have to go home, dial on your phone or your landline, or you have to go to your huge computer to go and find information. You can get it anywhere, anytime. So that was the vision at that time. It looked like a huge dream, because the technology was way, way far away from achieving that point of billions of cell phones that we have nowadays. And that was sort of the beginning. So we start thinking about sort of how the research we were doing at that time can make a difference
to going towards this future.
Wow. So what was the research that you're doing at that time that helped bring this mobile technology to more people?
Yeah. So at that time, the phone industry is really the phone industry. The only application is basically talking on your phone, right? You dial your phone and you start talking to your mom and your dad, okay, or not.
Yeah.
Now, however, at that time, people start realizing that, hey, maybe the future is not just talking. The future is any type of data. It could be like a Zoom call we're having right now, which is video. It could be sending massive, huge files. It could be images. It could be all types of data. And so at that time, we start thinking about how to design the wireless infrastructure to support data communication as opposed to just voice communication. And that was a sort of a big break from the past, because telephony, the 100 years before that, has always been centered around telephone, talking, audio. And so that was the time of innovation, the time of thinking about how to design systems, wireless systems, to facilitate data communication, basically. Yeah.
Wow. So these breakthroughs set the foundation and paved the road for all the other types of communication in addition to just talking. So like data streaming.
Exactly. And one property of data is that it's huge amount of data, right? So one voice call is like only 20 kilobits per second. You can support a voice call rate, but data, we're talking about many orders of magnitude larger. So at that time, the biggest challenge was, well, this wireless spectrum that we have is really, really rare, very, very limited resource, and very, very expensive. So how to try to squeeze all this data into such a narrow, limited resource is kind of what we were focusing on at that time, designing better and better communication schemes to be able to send data through this very limited resource.
That's amazing. And then through your research, how did it get rolled out to market? Like who eventually adopted the research?
Yeah, so at that time, I was a professor at Berkeley. That was my first faculty position. And at that time, my research was basically solving this problem. And I had an opportunity to spend a year at a company called Qualcomm. So Qualcomm at that time was a really small company. It wasn't a very big company. But they had some ideas on how to build wireless systems for data, focusing on data, some new innovations. And it turned out that the research I was doing fit very well into that system that they were building. So it naturally led to a few key patents, a few inventions, a few algorithms that enable the throughput of the system to double. And so that was when my research became innovations in wireless system, and the Qualcomm system that designed ultimately became the third generation cellular wireless standard. And the third generation evolved into fourth generation. So that's how my research became technology that is used by everybody.
Wow. Okay. So that was your claim to fame, and the Qualcomm created the 3G and then the 4G network, and then they even used some of your patents from your research. Is that correct?
Correct.
So this is like your this is really inspirational, because I think you have a pretty rare founder origin story, right? It's not the typical founder origin story. And I think this is insightful, especially to people in academia. I could sort of see this as like a stepping stone, right? You from the theoretical world into the applied world. In this case, it was a massive success with Qualcomm. And then through your research, you were able to create some patents. And I'm guessing that you also made some money from those patents. So that was like maybe your first taste of how academic could be transferred into like something more entrepreneurial, right? Is that correct?
Unfortunately, okay, I have to be honest there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, those patents belong to Qualcomm.
Oh, okay.
So I get some
Oh,
bragging rights, but not necessarily some financial benefits.
okay. Well, okay. So thank you for your. So this is something that I'm very curious about. Um, how did you feel about that? Like it was your work, your research, but then Qualcomm took, like, they got the credit for the patents. Like, well, you got the credit for creating it, but they
Yeah.
got the credit for the commercialization of it. How'd that make you feel? I'm just curious. I mean, it was a long time
Oh,
ago, but it's like a
yeah. I felt great. So here's the deal, right? So wireless communication is a very complex system, very complex system. So there's no one single individual with any invention that would be able to influence the entire standard. It requires sort of the whole system building. And this cannot be done with a single individual or even a small startup. So it has to be done with a pretty significant effort. And sort of Qualcomm provided that effort. So without Qualcomm, my invention would never have gone into a core part of the third generation, fourth generation
yeah.
standard. So, in my mind, financial incentive is definitely a great thing. But to me, as an inventor, as a researcher, the number one thing is to be able to make an impact onto the real world. And I achieved my goal. And so
Wonderful.
on the long run, I think it was a great thing for me. So
That's
it's
excellent.
okay. It's okay.
I love that you say that, because I mean that's sort of like any kind of meaningful ecosystem. It's a collaborative effort, just like the Bitcoin ecosystem is. And this is also why you're sharing your origin story, to inspire more builders and founders to come to innovate on Bitcoin. So with that said, okay, so that was a great first chapter, and I could see where your technical expertise is coming from now. MIT, Berkeley, you invented some patents for Qualcomm to create the what is today's basically telephone network system beyond just voice, right? So this is very significant contribution. And what's the next big thing like that you did that was either entrepreneurial or innovative, right?
Yeah. So after that, I continue on my research life, and in wireless communication. So, and then we got into about 10 years ago, I would say, 10 years ago. And at that time, I got a little bit bored. I said, this wireless thing, at that point now, almost everybody has a cell phone. So when you have a technology where everybody has that technology, it becomes a commodity. And so any further research will have only marginal improvement. You won't get any groundbreaking research like I did 20 years ago with
Right.
Qualcomm. And so I start exploring multiple different research areas. So one thing good about being an academic is that academic is very free to look at many different research areas to try to find some new innovative area to do research in. And after looking at several research areas, so I can give you some examples. For example, we looked at computational genomics. So that was one area I was quite interested in. Machine learning, also I look at some machine learning problems. But then I really got my a good break, I think, when I came across Nakamoto's white paper.
Mm.
Yeah. So I would like to say, so obviously your audience is very familiar with Nakamoto's white paper because he was the inventor of Bitcoin. But maybe I could give a little bit of my perspective on that white
Yeah, that'd
paper
be
from
interesting. Yeah,
from
like
my
when you read it,
background.
what was like, we'd love to learn, like, when you read it, what was the thing that, I
Yeah.
mean, I would have, yeah, I mean, this is really interesting, right? Because it's a brilliant it's a brilliant paper, but from people with different backgrounds will interpret it differently, right? So I would love to see how you interpret it the first time you read it.
Yeah. So, my previous research was in wireless communication, as I mentioned, but there is actually something very fundamental below my research, which is called information theory.
Mhm.
So, and that was sort of the subject matter that I was an expert in. Now, information theory, just like blockchain was basically invented by a single individual. Now, if you look at the science, many different types of sciences, engineering disciplines, it's extremely rare for something to be invented by a single individual. Usually it's a many people's effort, like quantum mechanics, for example. You can see many scientists that contribute towards quantum. But for information theory, just like Bitcoin, just like blockchain, was invented by a single individual called Claude Shannon. And in 1948, this guy is a genius. Claude Shannon is a compatriot of Alan Turing. So Alan Turing invented basically the fundamentals of computer science, and Shannon invented fundamentals of communication through his information theory. So a single paper basically defines the entire field, and all the innovations is sort of on top of that paper. So that's the second time I got this impression was reading Nakamoto's white paper, that, wow, this single paper essentially defines entirely a new field, field. It's not an algorithm, it's not just one algorithm, it's essentially the whole field. So I can see the whole field sort of emerging from that paper, just like it emerged from Claude Shannon's information theory paper 70 years ago.
Wow. Thanks for sharing with that. That's intellectually very stimulating. And then what year did you read this in?
That was in 2001, beginning of 2018. That was one of the early times when Bitcoin had a bubble, when Bitcoin became 20K. If you remember that time.
I remember. I mean, I think everyone here remembers that time, thinking that it was too high to buy. So let's backtrack just a little bit, right? So this is 2018, and what compelled? Because I'm sure you've heard about this, right? You're in the Silicon Valley, at this time, or you're still at Berkeley, or had you already moved to Stanford?
Yeah, I've already moved to Stanford. So I was at Berkeley until 2014, and in 2014 I moved to Stanford. And this was part of my exploration of new ideas and new areas.
Yeah, so I mean, you're no stranger to this, right? You're in the Silicon Valley. This is like the bleeding edge of tech, and you have friends around you already innovated with Bitcoin. But what finally compelled you to say, "All right, I got to pick up this paper and I got to read it finally"? What was that deciding factor, right?
The thing is, here's the thing about research and about technology, right? Because there's just so many things going on. So a typical researcher is typically rather focused on their own discipline.
Right.
To make innovation, sometimes you really have to focus. And so although I've heard of something like Bitcoin, honestly, okay, to be honest about it, when I heard the word Bitcoin at that time, I thought of some kind of scam or something,
That's what I thought too.
There's nothing to worry about. Like, I was focusing on my, scientific discipline and information theory, etc. And Bitcoin is like, okay, some scam. Don't worry about that. Until a friend of mine, who's also a professor, keep on bugging me and say, you have to read this paper. This is not a scam. This is the real new science and new field emerging. So that's when I read that paper. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's okay. Thanks for sharing. Okay, excellent. So you read this, and then 2018 to now, that's roughly what, 5 years plus or minus?
Yeah, 5 years ago. Yeah, 5 years ago, about 5 years
ago. Okay, and so when you read this, you just shared with us, your first impression was like, wow, this is one of those papers that could spawn an entire industry, basically, right? And then what can you walk us through the process? Because I'm sure that a bunch of ideas went off in your mind over a period of time, right? But maybe give us some of those highlights, and then how you finally came to Babylon Chain, right? I mean, because 2018. I mean, even now, the sky's the limit, and there's just it's just limited by our imagination right now, right? But back then, you read this paper, your synapses were firing. What were you thinking? What were some of the ideas, or the game changers, or whatever? Give us some highlights and how it evolved to Babylon Chain. Which for the listeners that are just coming in, Babylon Chain has done for the first time ever on Bitcoin. You can use Bitcoin to stake proof of stake networks and earn a yield from that. So this is a massive game changer. But before we get into that, let's see how it evolved to get to this point, right? There's like a 5-year period here. Like, give us some highlights here.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when we looked at this paper, actually, I should say that I wasn't the only one was doing this research on this paper, because at the same time, I had a colleague. His name is Shuram Kannan. I don't know if you know him, but he's the founder actually of EigenLayer. We were actually collaborators in research, and him together with another professor, Pramod Viswanath, from at that time Urbana-Champaign, now at Princeton. 3 of us were sort of looking at this paper and trying to find some interesting new research problem. So one thing we observed coming from a cellular wireless background, okay, is that, hey, this system is really amazing. It's permissionless, consensus. But from a communication point of view, wow, the communication rate is very, very low. 5 transactions per second. Whoa, this is even slower than the modems in the 80s, the telephone modems in the 80s. I don't know if you remember. And then we realized, in those days, the telephone modems communicated, yeah, exactly, with this strange sound, dial-up modem with this strange sound. And those days, yeah, they were running at, 10, 15K per second, kilobits per second. And that's basically the communication rate of Bitcoin. And I said, whoa, and then we said, this is amazing, because the communication infrastructure has improved many, many orders of magnitude since the days of dial-up modem. But yet, Bitcoin cannot utilize that communication infrastructure because the rate is so slow. And so we start asking the question, with such an advanced communication infrastructure on which Bitcoin is running, why is Bitcoin so slow? So we start asking, if you want to build a consensus system like Bitcoin, is there any sort of fundamental limit on how fast Bitcoin can go, or blockchain can go? So that was our starting point. In other words, in the language which you may be more familiar, is how to scale Bitcoin. And so we actually wrote a quite a beautiful paper. It's still one of my most favorite paper in the blockchain space that I wrote. It's called Prism, okay, which is a protocol which enables us to scale Bitcoin in a very nice and natural way. So that's my favorite one of my most favorite papers. Not first paper. Hey, but then you may ask me at this point, hey, what project is implementing Prism right now? Okay. Well, unfortunately to say, no project that I know of is actually using Prism right now. And so you may ask, so what's the deal? I mean, what's your research? It's kind of useless. So you were just telling us in the beginning of the call that, research is about making impact.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Research about making impact is true, but often the first piece of research is hard to make impact. And the reason is because in the first part of research, so we understand the fundamentals of the problem, and we're coming in with a new perspective. But what we're missing is kind of the broader context of where the whole industry is going. And at that time in 2018-19, that was a time when everybody was shifting from proof of work to proof of stake. So when we told people that we have a protocol that scale Bitcoin, that people don't really care. They say, "Oh, sorry, man, we're going to proof of stake. I think your invention is about 5 years too late."
But okay. now is it like 5 years too early? Maybe that they realize.
So let me tell you a story. So everyone is moving to proof of stake. Ethereum is working on the merge, and there are a bunch of new proof of stake layer 1 showing up, like Avalanche and etc. Algorand and etc. So so we follow the flow and we say, okay, let's do some research on proof of stake protocol. And actually we're fortunate because one project we're working on was basically we found some attack vectors on the Ethereum proof of stake protocol back in 2021, I think a year before the merge. They published a paper, and then we figure out, me and my students at Stanford figure out that actually this protocol is not secure. There are attack vectors in this protocol. So we contacted Vitalik and his team, and we start collaborating with them to improve the proof of stake Ethereum protocol.
Wow.
So So again, these are one of this project where we get zero financial remuneration. Hey, there's a patent. Hey, Albert, there seems to be a patent here. Oh boy. Okay, maybe we don't want to go in that direction. All right.
I break this pattern. So let's we're getting to the juicy part, right? So this you guys were instrumental to
Yeah,
a
yeah,
couple of
but
industries now in different eras, right? And then
yeah, so we
as
actually
researcher,
contributed towards that protocol, and we made it more secure before the merge, and so the merge happened, and everything is good. But we sort of make a very strange observation at that point of the field. Okay, the field is kind of strange because you say, hey, you have all these movements towards the proof of stake world, but Bitcoin has not gone away. All
yeah.
these years we were doing research, and everyone's telling us, forget about Bitcoin. Let's do research on proof of stake. Let's do better protocol. Let's launch some new proof of stake token, blah, blah. But
Mhm.
Bitcoin has not gone away. In fact,
Yeah,
Bitcoin market cap as a relative fraction is more than 50%, I believe, still more than 50% of the
yeah,
total market cap.
right. That's right.
So now there's a strange phenomenon happening in this field, we find. One is that lots of innovation is happening on the proof of stake world, right? There's no doubt about that. There are new architectures, roll-ups, ZK roll-ups, optimistic roll-ups, fault-proof technology, bridges, many, many new technology happening primarily on the proof of stake world. But in terms of market cap, in terms of history, Bitcoin is still there. So we
Yeah,
start thinking
with
about,
over 50% of the market cap, right, for
yeah,
crypto.
yeah. So we start thinking about, hey, how can we actually, but another interesting thing about this is, number one is 50% market cap. And number two is the crypto world is kind of fragmenting now into sort of two halves. Because Bitcoin has relatively little connectivity with the proof of stake world. So, there are bridges between proof of stake chains, many types of bridges. And then there's some bridges also between Bitcoin and proof of stake chain. But those bridges, in terms of capacity usage, is relatively low. If you calculate how many Bitcoin, for example, is wrapped, it's like less than 1% of the total Bitcoin asset is wrapped. So the bridging is very little. So this blockchain economy is kind of fragmenting into sort of two halves. Bitcoin, more roughly 50% of the market cap, and the proof of stake world. And so we start thinking, is there any way of increasing the economic connectivity between these two sides of the universe? So that was sort of the starting point of this project Babylon that you mentioned earlier, that we are actively working on right now, is really to try to find some interesting new use cases for Bitcoin that enables a stronger economic connectivity between Bitcoin and the rest of the crypto world.
Well, this is like a very so thank you for sharing I guess this is like the origin, right, of Babylon. And this is a big problem to tackle because I mean I think a lot of the listeners know that there's a Delhi BTC, but it's always been stagnant, right? It's like the connectivity between Bitcoin and Ethereum in terms of wrap stuff it's never like you said it's hit a plateau and it stayed there for a very long time. And so Babylon is potentially a solution to open up the floodgates, so to speak, and allow that the free flow of value to go between chains, right? Between Bitcoin and POS, proof of stake chains. Is that correct?
Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
so
I can spend a minute.
this is 2021 that they started formulating,
Yeah,
or
at the end of 2021. Okay.
yeah,
So
it's like
actually, at that
NFT
time,
boom, everything. Yeah,
I was mentioning about Shuram from EigenLayer. At that time, we had a lot of discussion between him and me on sort of thinking about sort of various issues associated with security. So, so maybe before I talk about that, I should say a few words about why we think, at least, that there is such little economic connectivity between Bitcoin and the rest of the world. Okay, you
yeah,
mentioned about bridges. One of the biggest problem of Bitcoin in terms of interaction with the rest of the world is that there is very limited programmability on Bitcoin. Because of the lack of programmability, because of the lack of the smart contract, it's very hard to build secure bridging mechanism between Bitcoin and the rest of the world. Ethereum, for example, have smart contract, and using the smart contract, it can help the Ethereum for understanding better about the other chains that it's communicating with. For example, verifying ZK proofs. Bitcoin can't do that. Bitcoin cannot verify ZK proofs. So the miners will just keep mining blocks, but they have no idea what's happening to the rest of the world. And so because of this limited programmability, the communication between Bitcoin and the rest of the world is difficult. On the other hand, it's precisely because of this limited programmability that makes Bitcoin such a secure resource. Because you can imagine, I mean, you can ask, well, why are not people adding programmability capability to Bitcoin over the years? It's been around for 10 years already. Well, the thing is, in fact, Nakamoto, when he first invented Bitcoin, he came up with this Bitcoin script, right? Which is it's a programming language. It's not Turing complete, but it's a programming language. In fact, he had a lot of different opcodes in the beginning, and many of them were deleted early on by himself. And the reason was because he found a bug in one of them. And then he got really worried about the security risk. And so the limited programmability is essentially to preserve the high fidelity, high level of security of Bitcoin. And so there we go. We enjoy the security of this very important resource, but at the same time, the limited programmability makes it hard for it to communicate with the rest of the crypto world. And so our innovation, our thinking is that, is there a way to still use Bitcoin, and in particular use a strong security, and yet we don't need to increase or change the programmability of Bitcoin. So that's kind of the constraint that we have imposed on us. And lucky for us, we actually found such a use case, which we're very excited about. And this use case is very interesting. It is almost like an oxymoron use case. And the reason is because this use case is essentially turning Bitcoin asset, 600 billion of them, into a staking asset for the proof of stake world.
Okay, so let's unpack that. It's like in layman terms, like you're using Bitcoin to stake other proof of stake chains, right? Like what does this does this mean? Like what is there?
Yeah. The reason why I said it's oxymoron is a little bit like this, right? It's like, okay, Bitcoin, the proof of stake world was supposed to replace Bitcoin, right? That was the intention. But right. Bitcoin is still here. What we're saying is that actually the proof of stake world actually create a very useful new use case for Bitcoin. So that's a little bit of a comic take on the situation. Okay. So what is what so what's the so why so let's unpack that a little bit, right? So Bitcoin, everyone knows, is a proof of work chain. Okay. But the asset that is secured by proof of work is still a crypto asset. It's the electronic money. Mm-hmm. Okay. Just like any crypto asset, it can be used as the staking asset on a proof of stake system, on proof of stake chain. Because a proof of stake chain is secured by assets. And what we're saying is, what better asset are there than Bitcoin?
Okay. So, all right. So I'm sort of getting it now. Let me like paraphrase that to make sure I get it and the rest of the audience gets it too. So like, let's say we're on Ethereum and we have to stake Ethereum, right, to secure the chain. But instead of staking Ethereum, we're swapping that out now with Bitcoin.
Yes. So yes.
Is it a replacement or is it in addition to whatever we're staking with? Like if it's on Ethereum, then we're staking Ethereum. is it replacing that, or is it in addition to that right now? Like what's the
Yeah.
that?
So you can think of it this way. In typical proof of stake chain, the staking is achieved by the native asset, like Ethereum is staked by ETH,
Mhm.
Avalanche is staked by AVAX, Algorand is staked by Algo,
Mhm.
and Sway is staked by its native protocol, etc. Right?
Right.
Now, what we're saying is that, well, just like in a global economy, why do you have to confine your staking asset to be your local country asset? Why can't it be some other country's asset?
Right.
Because after all, we live in an interconnected world. Countries are connected together by trade. Why do we have to isolate ourselves to only your people, only your people in your country can secure this country? Certainly, countries also secure each other. I mean, United States secure other countries.
Right. The US dollar,
So
gold, etc. Right.
yeah. So therefore, now one can generalize this notion of staking to a staking portfolio. So you can use your native asset, but you can also use foreign asset. You can use multiple foreign assets. For example, you may use a native asset for a new project where the native asset is very volatile, but you complement that with a more stable asset like Bitcoin or like Ethereum. So that is the general sort of framework. And here we are proposing to use Bitcoin as a very important asset in this portfolio.
Okay, this is incredible. So I have Bitcoin right now. I'm just hodling it, right? It's not doing anything. Actually, one of the biggest one of the biggest pain points in our research through the Bitcoin Startup Lab and just drawing on all the founders that have gone through our program is that they like every cohort, everybody will run across somebody with a substantial amount of Bitcoin, and it's just sitting in their wallet. It's not doing anything. It's not earning interest, nothing. They're just like, I'm just going to hodl it. Right. But they say like, yeah, if there was something that was secure that could help me earn interest on it or yield, right? Yield, then I want to do it. Right. So this sort of sounds like, hey, people have latent Bitcoin now, but then if they use a Babylon chain, then they can earn a proof of stake yield, which, if you want more Bitcoin, you could convert it over to Bitcoin. But I mean, it sort of sounds like that's what's happening right now. Is this like the first feature that you guys
Yeah,
can
that's
think?
right. So the primitive that we're building is converting Bitcoin, the asset, to be able to, as a staking asset for almost any proof of stake chain. Yeah. So that's what we're building right now. So as I mentioned, the challenge is to do it securely. You mentioned that you have met a lot of people who are hodlers. They said they would like to participate. It's not like they don't want to earn any. I mean, everybody wants to earn
Who doesn't
some
want to
yield,
earn
right?
yield? Yeah, it's about
Yeah.
the risk.
So
Yeah.
so it's about the risk, right? Of course. And the challenge and what we have accomplished is to build a protocol in which no bridging of the asset and no centralized custodial of the asset is needed to accomplish this staking primitive, the staking functionality. So that's the technological innovation that we came up with.
Let's unpack that. What does that mean? So Bitcoin's in my wallet. If I like am I putting it on the Babylon
Yeah,
in a
yeah. So
there's a
so
non-custodial
yeah. So
way?
in fact, Bitcoin. Okay. So maybe we can start from something that
Yeah.
is
So
maybe familiar to your
through like
Bitcoin
this
audience.
use case. This is like the beginning right now.
Yeah. So Bitcoin. Okay. Functionality wise, there's an opcode called time lock. So you can put your Bitcoin on a time lock for say 3 months. Okay.
Right.
And then you cannot take this money out. You cannot take this money out until the 3 months have expired. Okay. So that is an opcode already there on the Bitcoin scripting language. Okay. So we can start with that as sort of the basic first step in this designing this staking functionality. So I require you, Albert, to take your 1 Bitcoin and put it in a time lock for 3 months. And you can use that, you can consider that time lock as a stake, okay? On a particular proof of stake chain, okay?
And so
the proof of stake,
before we continue, so if I understand correctly, the time lock feature on Bitcoin is it's basically non-custodial. No one can take my money, right? Is this I lock money up, and then once the Bitcoin reaches a certain number of blocks, it unlocks my money back to me. But during that time, I can take it because it's actually not, it's not on Bitcoin. It's not in someone else's wallet.
Exactly. Right? It's your address. Okay. It's your address. The only constraint for you is that you can't use this money. You can't send this money to someone else for 3 months. For 3 months. But it's still
the Bitcoin. Yeah. Okay.
Right. It's like lock in a place where you can't open the lock for 3 months, but you're the only one who has the key to open it. Okay. No one has the key to open it.
All right. Yeah, that's a good point. All right. So far so good. We're still like in the decentralized world here, non-custodial.
Yeah. So the analogy, therefore, is that it's like this, right? You go and rent an Airbnb for 3 months, okay? And you say, okay, to ensure that I don't mess up your place, I will put my money into a deposit, into escrow account that I control for 3 months during the stay. I'm staying there for 3 months, okay? Now, however, if you look at the Airbnb analogy, however, to make that a proper deposit or proper collateral, then what the owner of this Airbnb should be able to take your money in case that you have trashed the Airbnb upon your departure, right? Upon departure, the owner comes and says, hey man, this place is completely trashed. I need to take a deposit so that I can actually, repair the place, right? So there seems to be a dilemma here because first, your money, right, is locked up and you're the only one who can control the money. That's what I was telling you earlier. However, the owner has to have the ability to take away this collateral. Otherwise, you're not really staking because you're not really providing a collateral to ensure good behavior. So there's no security. It is just locking the money up for 3 months.
It's like an escrow. It's like an escrow.
Exactly.
Okay. It's locked in an escrow, and depending on the outcome. Okay.
Exactly. Now, okay. So now in standard proof of stake system, this thing about removing the collateral is called slashing. Okay. And typically the way it's done is the following: is that first it finds some evidence, cryptographic evidence that you've done something bad on the proof of stake chain. And you take this evidence and then you use this evidence and process it in a smart contract. And the smart contract will automatically deduct your deposit. Okay. So no human intervention is required in this process. So it's a trustless way. Okay. So basically we want to do the same thing for our Bitcoin staking protocol. Okay.
Wonderful.
However, there's one thing missing. There is no smart contract on Bitcoin. So we were stuck for many months. We were stuck for many months. We say, okay, there's no smart contract on Bitcoin, but we want to be able to automatically, trustlessly, without any centralized custodial. So you don't want to put the money right in some centralized custodial and let that guy decide. Okay, you have bad behavior, and I'll take away the money, because he may take away the money even if there's no bad behavior.
Right, exactly.
Okay, because he needs the money. Okay. We can give many examples in the past 1 year. Let's not name specific characters, but So that's sort of the challenge. Okay, that's sort of the challenge. And what we figure out is basically we can essentially encode this whole smart contract operation by using some cryptography combined with the limited scripting capability of Bitcoin to be able to achieve this goal, but without any change to the programmability of Bitcoin. So that's basically what we've accomplished from a technological point of view.
Wow, how long did it take you guys to get? Because as I understand it, you guys already have a working model, right? A proof of concept.
Yeah, so we thought about we're thinking of it for months, and we talked to some Bitcoin people. We talked to a bunch of Bitcoin people, and they told us, what you want seems to be impossible.
Wow, but you didn't take no for an answer. You guys just like, all right. So this is one of the hallmarks of great founders, right? It's like when, like,
one thing about research
thirst for pushing forward. Like, what can you sort of double click on that? Like, what were you feeling like getting stuck on anything for a few months? That's so frustrating, right? And especially when experts telling you, no, you can't do that. Right?
Yeah, so that I must say that this is kind of a hallmark of a stubborn person, and I think the stubbornness is quite correlated with my research background, because to solve hard research problems, think about Einstein, right? General theory of relativity. I mean, it's not something that he thought about for a few days and then came up with it. These hard problems that he thinks about probably over years, maybe even decades, different angles, and look at the problem. So a researcher, typically what happens is that if there's a difficult research problem, they think about it, for sustained period of time, they didn't get a solution, they put it down and think about something else, comes back to it. So there is a sort of a sustained effort. And the point is that if the problem is interesting and important enough, then one has to have some patience to think about the problem. So we thought about it for a while, yeah. And the thing is that so finally we came up with a solution, and I was able to go back to that guy and tell him, hey, actually we solved it.
I'm not going to ask you that guy's name. Okay?
No, do not ask me, because if I mention name,
I'm not going to ask you, but
you'll know that guy. You'll know that guy.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, I know that. All right, so I'll ask you in private though. But by the way, this is a little tangent, but like I'm really looking forward to seeing you in Stanford just in a couple of days here, and really, you have such an awesome team, and Trudy has been so instrumental to bring everyone together. So, she's not here on the call, but thank you to Trudy also.
Yeah, Trudy is really an amazing team member for us. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, no, she's definitely one of the critical elements to a great team. So yeah, coming back to, all right, so you went back to your friend who said no, like this is not possible, like a few months later, and we don't have to name any names, but what was like the reaction? I'm just curious there. What was the reaction? What did they say?
It's I must say he's surprised, but I think he's still trying to punch holes into our solution. In fact, No worries. Definitely, it's very healthy. I think it's very healthy to be skeptical, to be critical.
It's good to be rigorous.
Yeah, perfectly, very good. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is, like you said, it's a collaborative effort, and if this is the case that's gonna put billions or hundreds of billions or potentially trillions of Bitcoin to work, right? Staking, proof of stake chains, then it is important for a lot of smart individuals to try to poke holes in it, right? But this is how long ago? Because as I understand it, you guys already have a working model with Cosmos, right? So this is
so we have we have a proof of concept, which includes the cryptographic library that enables this. As I mentioned, it uses a technique called one-time signature. And I should shout out to, by the way, some collaborators in this project. So in addition to the Babylon team, we have engaged with a cryptographer. His name is Orpheus. And we also worked with a very, in fact, this was a person we met at the Bitcoin Miami. His name is Robin Linus. Robin Linus. Okay. In fact, Robin Linus had when we met him, we realized that he had some related ideas that we're thinking about a while back. And but there was some issue with those ideas, so he didn't pursue it further. But we start talking, and in fact, he's part of our collaboration effort here.
Yeah, no, he's brilliant.
He's a great guy, brilliant guy, really brilliant.
Thanks for making a shout out.
a shout out for these friends and collaborators. Yeah.
So maybe I should make a shout out too that, you know, we're very proud to say that Robin and also David are Bitcoin Startup Lab speakers and mentors, right? So that's also like you know, this is a one happy family ecosystem working together to push forward innovation on Bitcoin. So yeah, thank you for the shout outs. I'm sure they appreciate it. I'm gonna send this video to Robin later. I think he'll be very happy to have gotten the part of the credit for that. Now, you know, back to the matter at hand, right? How long has Babylon been running for now? Like when was like when we made that breakthrough? Like how long did it take you guys to get something working on you know in a
Yeah,
testing?
it takes so I must say we have an amazing engineering team of 7 engineers.
Wow.
And from the protocol design to the proof of concept, it took 2 months. It took 2
Wow.
months.
Okay.
So of course this is, so you know, the thing is that I should say that this Babylon project didn't start 4 months ago. It
Right.
started, as I said, a year or so ago. And in fact, we were already working on other Bitcoin security
Right.
sharing protocols.
There's
A protocol that we invented is called time stamping protocol, which uses Bitcoin timestamp for proof of stake blocks. So we have already a lot of design building experience on the Bitcoin network.
right.
And so we
Right.
kind of leverage off this experience to build this new protocol in a very short time. And it requires actually a lot of know-how to build on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is kind of a pretty quirky system, to say the least. A lot of you know, the scripting language is a interesting language. It's acquired taste, I should say, acquired taste to build on Bitcoin.
Okay, so okay, so when you say acquired taste, I remember the first time I drank coffee and it was horrible. But over time you learn to love it, right? Okay, all right, I
Yeah,
get it.
yeah, because you know the language is limited, right? The language is limited, but you want to do many things with it, and so you are, you know, innovating on using the language to
Yeah,
do the thing that you want to do.
to be very creative.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah,
So and like the Babylon Shine, you guys use Cosmos, right, as a first test case. Is there a reason why you use Cosmos instead of say
yeah.
like
So yeah, so we are basically our technology you can think of is a modular plugin to an existing consensus protocol. So you have an existing consensus protocol, and we put this additional modular layer to enable Bitcoin staking. So basically, that's the design of the modular architecture. Now, our first test case is Cosmos, and there are several reasons for that. One is that Cosmos have a very mature code base already called the Cosmos SDK. In fact, many chains uses the Cosmos SDK, not only Cosmos chains. For example, Binance, I think the Binance chain, Polygon was used, at least the first version of Polygon was built using Cosmos SDK. So it's a very mature code base. So we find that we can show that the proof of concept we can integrate with Cosmos SDK, then I think it would be a strong evidence that it could be used for many other systems as well. So that was the main reason. And two is that Cosmos, one thing interesting about Cosmos ecosystem is that number one, the founders are very innovative. The founders are very innovative. And many of them are actually, they call themselves hidden Bitcoin maxis, So these folks are
Wow.
interesting, right? Because Cosmos is one of the earliest proof of stake ecosystem, actually one of the earliest, much before the merge. They already launched the Cosmos chain, Cosmos ecosystem in 2019. And so these folks are basically early people in blockchain, in crypto. And one big reason why they started Cosmos was because they really wanted to innovate, and they're really strong believer in Bitcoin, but it was very difficult for them to innovate on Bitcoin because of various constraints that we discussed earlier. And so they started Cosmos so that they can continue to innovate. But deep inside them, they're really strong Bitcoin believers and lovers. Yeah.
Okay, so I can see how this is working out, and okay, so it was easy to integrate with them culturally,
Yes. Yes,
and
that's right.
and they're innovators and they've been around. And it's one of the top chains for some people who don't know, right? In terms of market cap and also like length of running, right? Now I also noticed that I think Cosmos chain has like one of the highest yields, right, for staking as well for the major chains also. So that also sort of plays into, I put my Bitcoin up to stake and secure the Cosmos chain, and then the yield is relatively higher than other chains that are, approximately the same size.
Yeah.
So that's also like another like economic incentive, right? to
Yeah. So
in a
actually,
sense,
the high
it's
yield of Cosmos chain.
Yeah, go
Sorry.
ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, the high yield of Cosmos chains is actually one of our inspiration of building this Bitcoin staking protocol. So because high yield sounds good for the stakeholders, but
Yep.
it's actually pretty bad for the chain itself. Because where does that yield come from, right? It must come from somewhere. And typically it comes from the inflation of the coin. So as we know, inflation in general is not a good thing. You don't want to inflate your currency if you don't need to. And so this inflation is very costly in terms of the development of that chain, because after all, if they inflate the coin, they would like to use the inflation to increase the application for which that blockchain is built for. Security is not the goal, right? The goal of blockchain is not security. Security is a means to a goal, and the goal is a use case, an application. And so our innovation, our idea of Bitcoin staking is really to think of Bitcoin as a much more stable asset. And many people have Bitcoin already. And so it is much easier to incentivize them to stake on a blockchain, as opposed to you go and ask people to buy a very volatile asset and stake it. And to get those people moving, you have to give them very high yield. So the incentive is that Bitcoin holders, they can earn moderate yield, but yet they can provide a cheap source of capital to secure these chains so that these chains can focus on the use case.
Wow, that's
So,
that's
so,
brilliant.
so
Brilliant.
that's the economic thinking behind the Bitcoin staking protocol.
Super. So, quick time check. We have about 22 minutes left. So, I'm curious. Let's can you share some alpha in terms of like when this will when can people start, like who should be building, like who do you want, who are the early collaborators or early people that should be getting involved with Babylon chain? Like, this is number one. And the second question is, when will all this go live on mainnet, and when can we start staking our Bitcoin and earning yield from proof of stake chains?
Yeah. So as I said, we launched I mentioned we launched a light paper on this protocol about 5 weeks ago. So
Yep.
everyone can go on our website. So I can do some advertisement here, babylonchain.io, and then you can you can click and get a light paper. So yeah, we just built the proof of concept. So we are at this moment talking to Bitcoin holders, like miners, and ask them whether they're interested in pledging some Bitcoin when our mainnet launch, which is shooting for just before the I was going to say the merge, but not the merge, the halving next year. So Ethereum has the merge, Bitcoin has the halving. So good.
Good. Oh, so you guys gonna just right around April, you guys is this gonna go
Yeah,
live?
we're shooting for that. We're shooting for that, and
Wow,
we
okay.
already get quite a lot of interest. We got quite a few hundreds of Bitcoin already pledged to stake on the mainnet at this
Wow,
point,
wow.
and we're working towards probably over 1,000. We're shooting for over 1,000
Wow.
Bitcoin.
So okay, hold on, hold on. Let me. What's the yield right now for Cosmos? If you stake on
For
Cosmos?
for Cosmos, it depends on so different Cosmos chain have different yield. So for example, on the Cosmos hub, the current yield is about 9%, if I remember correctly, about 9%.
That is okay, hold on. So normally I'm just hodling, right? But now there's a chance for me to earn 9% on my Bitcoin.
Yeah. So first of all, the 9% is for the most mature. The Cosmos. So I should say a few words about the Cosmos, right? So Cosmos the first Cosmos chain. So first of all, Cosmos is not a single chain. It's actually an ecosystem with many chains. That's why it's called a cosmos, like many stars.
Okay.
Okay. So the Cosmos Hub is like the first Cosmos chain. Okay. So
Like,
that this one has the longest history.
is that Atom?
Sorry, Atom. That's right.
Yeah.
Atom is the token. The Cosmos Hub is the name of the chain. And this one has the longest history, and therefore its yield is probably the lowest among all Cosmos chains. The reason is because typically when you have a chain early on, the inflation is high, the yield is high because you need to attract people to stake on a new asset, which is potentially quite volatile and could go south, right?
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, it gets a lot of yield, a high yield. And then as it becomes mature, the inflation goes down and the yield goes down. And so even for Cosmos Hub, the inflation rate is the yield is still around 9%. So it's pretty high. And
Yes.
so you can think of this, since you are Bitcoin Startup Lab, you are an investor. So maybe I should draw an investor's analogy. So
Yeah,
basically, this BTC staking protocol you can think of is like a investment vehicle. It allows Bitcoin holders to invest on their favorite new proof of stake project, right? They say, hey, this project has promise. Well, let me invest in it by using our trustless, secure staking protocol, and we can earn yield on that project. But at the same time, I don't have to have such big exposure to go and buy a lot of their native asset. I can still keep my Bitcoin. So I
yeah,
earn a yield and I get exposure, but my principal is still in safe Bitcoin.
that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So I could keep my Bitcoin, and as we know, after the halving, it's probably going to go bonkers again in terms of price increase. But then the Bitcoin, I can have it work for me and earn yield from other chains. And if I choose, I could just, once I get the yield, I could convert it to more Bitcoin. Right. So that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So, and this is launching like you were talking about Bitcoin halving. This is next April. That's about 200 days away. Okay. So who should be reaching out to you guys to get involved? I mean, it could be an investor, or it could be like builders, right? Builders, like, are you going to open source it and invite people to build different applications on top of Babylon chain? Like, how is, like, if we fast forward to maturity, right? What does a fully fledged working Babylon chain look like? Maybe if we,
Oh, okay.
it's
All
easier
right.
for
So
people to say, okay,
so
it's time to get
to be
involved.
honest, right? We have right now we built a primitive. Okay. We built a primitive. Now, this primitive can be applied in many different places. So, for example, it could be used, for example, to secure a so-called decentralized sequencer for rollups. So, for example, if you want to build rollups on Bitcoin, then you may need a decentralized sequencer because you don't want a centralized sequencer. And you can use BTC staking to secure that sequencer. So there are many different ways of using. So I propose the following. If you are
What's the value of a sequencer? Can you explain that in like layman terms? Like, what
oh,
is this?
okay, in a sequencer for rollup, right? The sequencer's responsibility is to batch all the transactions and put it into blocks, and then submit these blocks onto the layer one, the L1.
Okay, so it's a critical piece
Yeah,
of software.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So this sequencer typically is the original sequencer is very centralized,
Mhm.
controlled by one entity. But if that entity goes away, then it's gone. So
Yeah.
the trend right now is to build decentralized sequencers, which is like a bunch of validators sequencing. And well, these guys require stake to secure them. And Bitcoin stake could be a stake. So in terms of building, yeah. So anybody who is interested in Bitcoin staking, any new projects interested in Bitcoin staking, please come and talk to us. We'd love to partner with you on getting you guys Bitcoin staking. So that's one target. Investors, yes, we would love to talk to investors, especially investors who are aligned with our project. We'd love to look for. As you can see, our project is actually quite broad in terms of reaching different aspects of the ecosystem. Bitcoin holders on one side, proof of stake networks on the other side. So yeah.
And I also heard that someone who wants to build a ZK rollup on Bitcoin, right, should also look for you too,
Yeah.
because Okay, well, I actually have a team that's coming to Stanford with me that is actually doing just that, going to the Bitcoin Startup Lab. So you guys can have this conversation early. So when you go live, they can upgrade with this. This is an incredible piece of technology. Yeah.
Right?
Okay, so let's open up the floor for some questions. We have about 15 minutes left, so let's make them count. I see all right, here we go. Rafa's one of our students here going through the startup lab. He's building on L1 right now. I'm adding Rafa as a speaker here. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear him talking. Rafa, you're on. Go ahead and summarize your question here for David.
Yeah, thank you, Albert. David, this is awesome. I think this breakthrough use case has the potential of making Bitcoin much, much more valuable. My question is around, can you explain a little bit more how, technically speaking, that cryptography mechanism that you've described is equivalent to the smart contract piece is working? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So it turns out that basically, we have to understand a little bit about, okay, so in the Airbnb analogy, the analogy is that you mess up a house, right? You trash the house. So what is the analogy of trashing a house in blockchain? The analogy is basically this concept called equivocation, which basically means that, hey, I support a block, I vote for a block, and then I change my mind and I vote for another block of the same height. So in other words, I'm trying to create a fork on the blockchain. So basically, we design a signature scheme, a so-called one-time signature scheme, which basically, once you equivocate, once you make two conflicting decisions, then we can extract the private key of the signer of the block. And by extracting the private key, you can now go, anyone can report this like a fraud proof to go back to the Bitcoin chain, submit a transaction, and spend the Bitcoin from your deposit.
Yeah, I'd
So
like to
that's,
emphasize this is being done in a trustless way, right? This
yes,
is okay, good.
it's a trustless way, so it's automatic. Once you do a bad thing, then it's provably bad, and it leads to a consequence, which is the extraction of your private key.
Wonderful. So Rafa, did you have a follow-up question to that?
Actually, I don't, but I'm just like, my opinion of this is like, it's such a major breakthrough use case. Again, congratulations. This is not financial advice, but in my opinion, Bitcoin is about to get much, much more valuable.
Yeah. No, I mean it's all about connectivity, right? And this is a brilliant way to do it. Hi, how about this? Next up is Medici, and then after that is Fernando. So Fernando, you're second here. Okay, so Medici, go ahead and you're first, and then it's Fernando.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Hey,
Good morning, Medici.
it's Frederick.
Good morning.
Yeah, this is just the account I made for my team.
Okay.
But hey, oh man, I just love hearing academics talk about Bitcoin. So I'm just really thankful for this space. And I just wanted to ask, how, in your opinion, how does what you guys have created at Babylon, how could that possibly interact with PSVTs and DLCs?
Okay, so DLC is discrete log contract, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. So, by the way, I don't know what was the first acronym. Can you, what was the first thing again? Can you repeat? I'm not sure if I know that concept though.
PSVTs are partially signed Bitcoin transactions. So one party can sign one side of the contract, broadcast it, and then when another party likes those terms or accepts those terms, they can sign the second part.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, so actually that concept, thanks for letting me know about this concept. I didn't even know that there was a concept, but we actually use this in our contract. So think about, give you an example, right? So a staker, remember the staker is controlling this money, right? Staker controls money. But the validator is doing the bad thing, okay? So in the case when you delegate, the staker delegate the stake to a validator. So what we do is that the staker will pre-sign the slashing transaction, which send it to a burn address. Okay. And if the validator doesn't do anything bad, this will never be executed. The money will be withdrawn in the 3 months example. However, when the validator did a bad thing, the private key of the validator is extracted, and that private key can be used by anyone together with the pre-signed by the staker to slash that money to go to burn address. So in that sense, we use the PSTB concept. Okay. So in terms of the discrete log contract, so I think at the high level, the connection is that we are all using, in some sense, some cryptography to emulate functionality of smart contract at a high level. In terms of the actual relationship, I would say, at least in the current applications that we know of for discrete log contract, most of them are based on Oracle based. The contracts takes in input from Oracle about the world outside in the real world. Okay, like for example, the result of a game or a lottery or a competition. Okay, now different from us is that in our case there's no Oracle. Everything is trustless. So once you have Oracle, you have to trust the result of the Oracle, which may or may not be correct. We have no such need because we are taking into account on-chain behavior.
Wonderful.
So I'm sorry. Would it be possible, in your opinion, to monitor real world? I mean, I know you said you would need an Oracle, but is that something that if you guys were to incorporate real world assets in DLCs that you would be interested in maybe using an Oracle, or do you have the technology to not use an Oracle? Just interested.
Yeah. So let me. That's a very good question. I would like to say something about our technology, which is Bitcoin staking. So our understanding, right, is that the Bitcoin holders are typically very conservative. Okay. They don't want to mess around with the Bitcoin. It's gold. You don't want to mess around with gold. Okay. So what we're saying is that, hey, for this very particular but very important application of staking, we can do it in a completely trustless way. No Oracle, no trust. Okay. Now, once we have enough people using this Bitcoin staking protocol, then the confidence of interaction with the rest of the blockchain increases because more people get exposure to getting yield, etc. And then a part of these people may be willing now to do a little bit more trusted behavior, and that may be where sort of discrete log contract Oracle would come up. So our philosophy is let's do it step by step. First, step one is a very trustless protocol. Yeah, so that's our philosophy here in terms of how to get the Bitcoin holders engaged in the DeFi world.
Wonderful.
Sorry, Rafael, I'm gonna let you speak. I just one more question. Do you have a link, or how do we as teams schedule a call with you? Yeah, but thank you very much for everything.
Oh, okay. So Albert, are we sharing any information about a project after the call? Or how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, we could share something after. I mean, if there's something like what's the high level?
I don't know whether I should tell people that my Telegram, and then everyone. I don't know how many people are listening to it, but it's fine. I guess.
Maybe they can reach out to Trudy, and then Trudy can be the gatekeeper. Yeah, maybe we'll revisit that question like at the end. How's that? Because
I don't even remember Trudy's Telegram right now.
It's okay. You guys can reach out to me. I'll make it.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
But you can find me. Yes.
So yeah, great question. And I see Rafa's hand raised. So let's go to Fernando first. Fernando, if you're quick with your question, then we could get back to Rafa here. Hi, Fernando.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, hello, how are you doing?
Good.
My question is, like, you said, like, you have to stake for 3 months, right? Let's say after a month, I want to stake more. That extra a part of Bitcoin is going to be in another contract, or in the same contract, or the time is going to restart, or how it's going to work?
Yeah, so the 3 months is of course just an example of a time lock, but there are many variations on this simple example. And in fact, what we're building is something a little bit different, which is actually we can do unstaking on demand basis. So you can unstake anytime you want, actually. And then there we use a concept called relative time lock, which is also an opcode in Bitcoin script. So that's one thing. Another thing is in terms of adding the stake, yeah, so one can add a stake by probably another transaction. Yeah, another staking transaction. It has to be a separate one.
Wonderful. Great question.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then we're back to you, Rafa.
Yeah, thank you, Albert. I just want to say everything you say, David, is really mind-blowing. I think that in the question that Frederick had, I think there's maybe something to say about how composable that yield could be after you lock the Bitcoin, if that's possible. Because I'm currently building Bitcoin options directly on Bitcoin, and some of my customers are DeFi builders. They generate a yield with the Bitcoin, and I basically provide that primitive of ensuring that yield in dollar terms, but paid in Bitcoin, which is pretty cool because if Bitcoin price goes down, then they get more Bitcoin and their end users still make a yield. That yield covers for the premium. So the question is it composable? That would be awesome.
Yeah. So composable in this context means combining with another protocol. Is that your question here?
So I have a background in finance, and usually, there's these primitives, and you compose them, and it allows you to create a new product, maybe a more customized product. So that's why I'm asking: would there be a way for, in turn, take that yield and kind of like lock it into a product that's a little more sophisticated, or combines other primitives such as Bitcoin options?
Yeah, so to clarify, the yield, okay, the yield is reward. The reward is coming from the proof of stake system that you are staking on. So that the yield generation is actually happening on the proof of stake chain. So if you want to compose the yield with something else, then that something else could be done on the proof of stake chain. It doesn't have to be back on the Bitcoin chain.
Super.
Yep. Thank you.
Excellent. This is great. So we have a couple of minutes left. We're almost on time here. So if there are no further questions, let's do a quick checkout. Thank you again, David, co-founder of Babylon, also Stanford professor, for sharing your founder's journey. I think the way things are going, you might have to give up your professorship at Stanford and go all in on Babylon around the next Bitcoin halving. Yeah, we're all hoping that this is going to become a big success. It's already, again, guys, it's to all listeners, this is already on testnet. It's already running. So come and contribute either as a user or as a collaborator.
Just to clarify, so it's a proof of concept, and we're building the testnet in the fall. So we haven't launched a testnet on BTC staking yet.
Oh, okay. So the test. Okay, so it's a proof of concept.
We have a testnet on the timestamping protocol. We're building a second testnet with BTC staking enabled, but this is happening in the fall. Yeah, we're working towards that right now.
Okay, so that's this fall, right? So
yes, this fall. Yeah. So we have a proof of concept, and anyone who is interested in collaborating with us, I'm happy to do a demo on the proof of concept. But then we're building on top of the proof of concept towards a testnet in the fall. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So I mean, it's just right around the corner. And again, David and his team, they've been building up to this point in time, right? There's the accumulation of multiple experiences around Bitcoin, around the space. So also, if you're an investor, I would probably suggest that you jump in now before like everyone else tries to jump in, which is the worst time to jump in. So now is better than later, especially with the next Bitcoin halving. It's not just the Bitcoin halving, but it's also the launch date of the live Babylon chain, the mainnet, correct?
Yes, that's our goal.
Yeah, perfect. It's a great goal. It's great timing. It's great time in the market. And I hope to all listeners that some of you are aspiring entrepreneurs or founders or innovators, that this inspires you to work with Babylon Chain and come innovate some really awesome stuff on Bitcoin. And if you want to meet more like-minded people, sign up for the Bitcoin Olympics, or if you feel like, hey, I want to become a founder now, sign up for the Bitcoin Startup Lab. We help you turn your ideas into investment or these startups on Bitcoin. Okay, and then the way you do that is this: you click on our if you're in Twitter, is at BTC Startup Lab, and you can find us. Okay, and if you want to find out more about David's creation, David and his team's creation, go to babylonchain.io. Was that correct, David? Babylonchain.io. Okay,
Correct.
or if you're in the Twitter Spaces, just click on the Babylon Chain icon right now and give them a follow and keep updated. With that said, thank you so much. Thank you, all the listeners. Thank you for everything, everyone. And again, great job, David, to you and your team for being one of the top 30 innovators in Bitcoin in 2023.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the honor. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. So I'm going to sign off here on Twitter here. And then I'm going